Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Robert. This is my Nissan 370Z and this is the TopGuns ACE Supercharger kit. And let me tell you, this thing's amazing. So let's start off by talking about how this vehicle is to drive around town. When I first installed the Supercharger kit, I didn't want to lose the day-to-day drivability. And I am happy to report that on this car, with this Supercharger kit, the car feels almost completely stock whenever you're keeping under about 3,000 to 4,000 RPM. Because this is a Supercharger kit, it doesn't build boost until you get higher up into the rev range. And that means that when I'm driving around town normally like this, it doesn't feel like the car is trying to take off whenever I'm just trying to get up to speed or just trying to run and get groceries. And for me personally, that's a trait that I really appreciate in a Supercharger kit. I can just drive it to the store without, feeling like I'm constantly on boost, and the car just seems to drive perfectly fine. The biggest difference you're going to notice whenever you're just trying to drive the car normally around town is, of course, going to be the noise. First and foremost, you got a bit of a blow-off noise. So there's a couple of different blow-off valve options for this car. I've got the Precision Turbo 50mm blow-off valve. This blow-off valve is still fairly audible. It's more audible outside of the car where it's very clear that you can hear it. Inside of the car, you of course can still hear it as well. And personally, I like the blow-off valve noises. I didn't want it to be too overbearing or kind of too loud to draw too much attention. And the Precision Turbo blow-off valve is pretty good for that. You can also get a teal blow-off valve, which is a lot louder if you want to announce your presence from miles away. But yeah, the blow-off valve noises are going to be very audible. That's just kind of a given with any sort of forced induction application. There's also a very distinct flutter. So I don't know if you guys can hear it or if it'll come off on camera. There is a very distinct flutter that comes from this kit. From what I understand, what's happening is the actuation from the blow-off valve whenever you are at cruising, you're not giving it a lot of throttle. That actuation resonates back into the Supercharger unit itself, so it sounds like it's coming from the Supercharger, but it's actually a noise that your blow-off valve is making. There is currently some research going into trying to quiet it down a little bit. Aaron's trying to use a couple of different blow-off valve setups to see what is quieter, but it's not too overbearing, and if you have an exhaust on your car, you're really not going to hear a whole lot of the flutter even to begin with. But one of my favorite noises is the noise on decel. Now, it's going to be very difficult to pick it up on camera, but whenever I'm on decel, especially from a higher RPM, it almost sounds like a jet engine spooling down. It's pretty insane. Now, of course, I said that the car feels almost completely like stock whenever you're driving around town. But if you get on the throttle, it is a whole new story. Oh yeah. It's difficult to show on camera just how much faster this car feels right now. The best analogy I can give is that normally before I had supercharged the car, whenever I wanted to floor the vehicle, it just felt like the acceleration over the rev range slowly began to die off as wind resistance began to build and as the car kept going faster. With the Supercharger kit, it feels like that acceleration is just constant, maybe even picking up a little bit. As you get going faster and faster, as the boost begins to build, it's almost a little bit scary. It's like the car is just continually forcing you forward, and it's just an experience that's a little bit odd to me. This is the first time I have ever had a Supercharger turbocharged car, and I'm always used to just kind of feeling that acceleration die off as you go faster. But this car just keeps going, and it is insane. we know that this kit can drive and drive really well, but how easy is it to install the TopGuns ACE Supercharger kit? Well, I did a complete DIY build series. I went through and showed the entire process from fuel injectors to fuel pump to the kit itself. You can go through and watch all of those videos to form an opinion yourself, but I'm happy to report that this kit is super easy to install. I'm not actually a professional mechanic. I'm kind of self-taught. I've done everything based off of PDFs, research that I found online. This kit is super easy to install compared to anything else I've seen out there. Total installation time, if you're fairly handy with tools, should probably only take you about 8 hours or so. It's made relatively simple due to the fact that it integrates the factory manifold. A couple of the Supercharger kits out there still use the Stillen manifold, like the Soho and the original Stillen kit. That manifold can be pretty tricky to install and adds to the overall difficulty and installation time for the kit. The fact that it's a Supercharger kit also means you don't have to take off your exhaust manifold, so that makes it a lot easier as well. The plumbing is generally just easy to throw in there. There's not really a whole lot of weird angles or things to kind of get in there and install all the plumbing. It's super easy to do. There's only a couple of things you really have to modify, like the area where the intakes go through the front core support. You're going to have to Dremel that out to make room for the larger plumbing, but that's pretty much the case with any intakes that you're going to put on this car. Yeah, installation was just super easy. I highly recommend this kit if you're looking to install the forced induction kit yourself and you're not looking to pay somebody. It was super easy to do. You just got to move around a couple of things, like obviously it uses an aftermarket fluid reservoir to make room for the additional plumbing on the front, but moving all that stuff is not complex at all. In fact, the couple of things that I would say were the hardest to install on this kit was bending that coolant line out of the way. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go through and watch the Supercharger install video that I did to see the coolant line. That thing is really hard to get to, but it only took me maybe about 15 to 30 minutes of finagling with it to finally get it moved. And then if your kit didn't come with the Supercharger belt installed, it does take a little bit of time just to try and get the process down for putting that belt on there. But I mean, this kit is just really easy to install. In fact, I'd be willing to say that it is the easiest forced induction kit to install on the VQ platform. Highly recommend this kit if you're looking to do a DIY install. Alright guys, so we know that this car feels powerful, but how much power does it actually make? Let's talk about the numbers. So I did a dyno video on this already. Most of you have probably already seen it. You can check it out in the top right corner up here. But yeah, with none of the pre-filters on, I managed to make 523 wheel horsepower at about 14.5 pounds of boost. While during my normal day-to-day driving with all 3 pre-filters on, it makes closer to about 450 to 460. You can potentially make more horsepower than that. I have seen on 93 octane as much as 600 horsepower or more coming out of this kit with a more aggressive tune. With E85, of course, you can push that even further. 650 is easily within reach. It all depends partly on how aggressive you want your tune to be. I erred on the side of caution and made sure I got a conservative tune for my car, so that way it runs fairly reliably. I'm showing you now on screen what the difference is between my naturally aspirated tune and the current tune with the Supercharger. We can see that starting off, the torque curves are fairly close. Not a whole lot of boost is built up here. I had said originally that the car doesn't really build boost until about 3,000 RPM, but it does technically make about 3 to 4 PSI based on the data logs. So we can see there that the torque curve starts off a little bit higher, but you can really start to feel that difference as those torque curves begin to split up. As you begin to build more boost with the Supercharger, as the revs climb, you can really feel all that additional acceleration. It's pretty intense. So right around 5,000 RPM, and I've noticed this with a lot of other kits as well, not just for the 370Z, but also, for instance, with Mustang torque curves. Generally, as you begin to climb up in the rev range, it seems with Superchargers, there is some sort of turning point where your torque curve begins to flatten out or even begins to dip. This might just be due to the efficiency losses of the Supercharger itself as you're beginning to use more and more horsepower to spin the thing up. It may also be related to the tune. There's a bunch of different factors that can go into why this torque curve is tailing off like this. If you have any ideas, feel free to leave a comment down below. It's open to speculation right now for me personally. So, we know that this kit drives pretty well, we know that it makes a ton of power, and we know, of course, that it's easy to install. But how does this kit look sitting underneath the hood? We'll let y'all decide that for yourself. In a word, this kit looks amazing. The integration of the factory manifold and how precisely each of these pieces fit almost makes it seem like this kit belongs in the car from the factory, especially if you opted to have yours painted in matte black, or of course you can have it done up in some other crazy color if you so wish. With the hood closed, there's very little indication that this car is boosted apart from a glimpse of the intercooler poking through the grille. And of course, nothing stopping you from cutting away the bumper to improve airflow and make your boosted presence known. So talking about reliability for a little bit, I've been driving this car since about mid-October. I've already put about 5,000 miles on the Supercharger kit, and I have had no issues whatsoever apart from a couple that were self-induced from the install. Those of you who follow my channel know that I, of course, nicked the VTC solenoid, and that did cause a couple of misfire issues. But other than that, I mean, the kit runs absolutely solid. Like, there is no complaints really that I have in terms of day-to-day drivability. You can definitely daily drive this kit, and as long as you're happy with the amount of noise that you're getting from it, I mean, there's nothing that can prevent you from driving this to work, to go get groceries, driving it every single day. As I said, 5,000 miles on the kit already. As long as you're keeping up with your maintenance, there are a couple of things I want to note. First off, when you are starting your car in the morning, make sure you let your car warm up a little bit longer. That's the case with any sort of supercharger kit. You want to make sure that the car warms up longer. That way the supercharger spool itself gets time to heat up. You really shouldn't bring your car above about 3,000 RPM until your oil temps have come up to temp. So just keep that in mind. Also make sure you're keeping very diligent on your oil changes. First off, your oil is going to run hotter now in the engine, so you want to make sure that you're changing that out consistently. And also make sure you're changing the oil out of the supercharger kit itself. Very important things to note. But yeah, from a reliability standpoint, anybody that says you can't daily drive a supercharged 370Z, absolutely wrong. As long as your tune is reliable and as long as you keep up with the maintenance of your car, you can definitely daily drive this thing. So, on the subject of fill-ups, and specifically on fuel efficiency, it's probably a subject that none of you necessarily care to hear about if you're planning on supercharging your car, but with gas prices going up again, I think it's kind of relevant. But yeah, so for fuel efficiency, before I installed the supercharger kit on this car, I was making about 20 to 22 miles per gallon, somewhere in there. I anticipated after installing this kit it would probably be closer to 15 or 16. With supercharger kits, they run a lot less efficient than, say, a turbocharged system because you're taking power directly from the drivetrain through the serpentine belt to be able to drive your blower. So I figured it would just be a huge fuel economy dip. But I have been keeping track of my fuel economy numbers in here. Basically, every single time that I've done a fill up, I have actually been logging how many miles and how much fuel I put in the car for about the past 5,000 miles or so. And I'm happy to report that I'm averaging roughly around 17.5 to 18 miles per gallon, which is not bad actually. As I said, I anticipated it being much worse. 18 miles per gallon is really nothing, and that's a combination of city and highway driving. So, I mean, I'll take it. It's really not bad at all. So let's talk about pricing. So the TopGuns ACE kit by itself comes in at $6,250, which I believe is the most inexpensive kit that's currently available on the market, largely due to the fact that, of course, it integrates the factory manifold, so you don't have to go and buy the still-in-one. There's just a bunch of things that Aaron from TopGuns has done right to try and keep this kit inexpensive. Now, that does not include the cost of your fuel injectors. It also doesn't include the cost of any fuel pump upgrades you need to make. So, and it doesn't include the cost of tuning either. So you need to keep all of that in mind whenever you're buying this. You're not going to be spending just that $6,200. There's a lot of other hidden costs that are going to go into supercharging your car. If you want a complete cost breakdown of my build, I actually did a video on this already. See the link in the top right corner. It goes through everything you need to know about the cost for being able to supercharge your car, what's the minimum and maximum you can expect to spend, and all that good stuff. So yeah, this kit is pretty freaking amazing. There's not a whole lot really negative that I have to say about it. There are a couple of key points that I want to talk about, however. One of the things I want to speak to is fitment. And this isn't a knock on the TopGuns ACE kit specifically, but the VQ engine bay is very, very tight. There's not a whole lot of room to put extra goodies in here. Obviously, we had to relocate the coolant reservoir just to be able to make all this plumbing fit. And then the fitment itself is very, very tight, as I had just spoken to. So getting it to fit properly without having the plumbing butt up against anything is a bit of an art form. I didn't get it quite right the first couple of times, so you can see that my plumbing is a little bit scratched up. But if you take your time with it and you really try and finagle it around, You can get it so that the Cobra head fitting is sitting perfectly between the supercharger and the wheel well. You won't have any butting up there. One of the other points you need to look out for is underneath the center strut bar. Originally, there's some spacers that you use to try and space that strut bar up a little bit, but I found you sometimes need a little bit more to get it to clear properly and not be butting up against anything. So yeah, fitment can be pretty tricky. I also just told you guys about the noise that the blow-off valve makes. The flutter can be a little bit annoying at cruising. There are fixes to get around it, however, as I just said, the QRJ blow-off valve with Aaron's silencer, that will help silence the flutter, so it'll sound a whole lot better. So that's easily fixable as well. I will say that getting the supercharger kit in itself, just the buying process, was a little bit long in the tooth. It did take quite a long time to get this kit. I already told him that I was ready to buy in about February or March. I was ready to pay him, and I really didn't get all the stuff for my kit until September. But to his credit, we have been dealing with a COVID pandemic that has made it extremely difficult to get parts. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge, and the fact that he was even able to deliver on these kits with everything closed down like it was pretty impressive. I do hope that he's able to kind of improve on his ability to be able to get kits through in the future. But that's really all I have to say about it. Oh, that's right. There's one other key point. The number one letdown about this kit is that it's not even available anymore. But that's because there's something even bigger and better being developed in the TopGuns Skunk Works. Find out more next episode.